what in this moment serves the energy of us, not just what is my impulse that I need to just bite you because I'm. So these are the moments where you can really feel someone's embodiment with their dark feminine or masculine. And in the boardroom, same thing. When someone can get passionate without being overwhelmed by that, and they know how to harness that energy and channel it with focus, with vision, with precision, and they can just embody that passion, but then they can rein it in. You can tell they've done some work with this part of themselves behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think what happens in business is mirrored back in relationship and vice versa. Mm-hmm. What you're attracting in your experience as a business person is going to be interestingly reflected in your partnership. So just being aware of that, I think people can go a lot deeper into what their next material that the universe is giving them to work on.
Mm-hmm. And I would, add to that, which is that when people are not embodied in their dark masculine feminine, when they don't have a healthy relationship with that, they'll either go on to attract that unhealthy dark, masculine feminine in their partnership, or I would even say the opposite, where they need to have that super light to feel very safe.
Yes.
And not even touch the cacophony that comes with this embodied dark archetype.
Welcome to It's Not What You Think, the podcast that takes you on a transformative journey to rewrite your story of greatness and reawaken your soul's purpose. I'm your host, Celine DaCosta, a subconscious mind expert, master coach, and believer in the limitless power and magic that lives within all of us. My intention in this podcast is to propel you into your next level of success so that you are free to create the life that your heart most desires. Through deep, actionable insights, personal stories, and world-class guests, I'll provide you with the tools, strategies, and resources you need to unlock the fullest expression of who you're meant to be in this lifetime so that you can consciously design a reality that is beyond what you could have ever dreamed of. Join me on this journey to personal growth and evolution, and let's live our lives in accordance with our highest soul's calling. This podcast is your weekly check-in to help this path become more simple, obtainable, and fun. Thank you for tuning in today, and now let's dive in.
Hello, soul family. Welcome back to It's Not What You Think. I am very excited and juiced up about today's guest, Luci Lampe. We are going to be talking all things dark feminine, sex, mysteries, living in the mystery, and as well as the dark night of the soul. So before I further introduce you, Luci, hi.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
I'm so looking forward to this. So a little story about how I met Luci. Unlike many of the guests on this podcast, actually, I have not yet met her in real life, although I am sure that is only bound to happen. I got connected to Luci through Instagram about a year or so ago. I started following this woman because there was so much that I saw in her and in her method of self-expression that I saw in myself. I even get goosebumps as I'm speaking into this. Just she has this incredible embodiment of the wild, unleashed woman, which will become very clear by the end of this episode. I really connected to her also embodiment of the dark feminine and just how she was able to express eroticism, sexuality, as well as being a mother, a wife, a friend, and an influencer. And even though I hate that word, but it is that, and really influencing so many women to reconstruct their relationship to their femininity, to really evolve it. And so that's how I personally came to find her. And when it came to the podcast, I was sharing this with Luci before we pressed the record button. I normally invite people that I know personally, but I just kept getting this intuitive ping. Message her. And the third time I was like, you know what, Spirit, fuck it. I'm going to message her. And then immediately, we got along like a house on fire. And I realized that she needed to be here for us to have a conversation that I still have no idea what we're going to be talking about, but it needs to happen. So yeah, Luci is a trauma-informed sex and relationship coach. She's also an award-winning singer and songwriter, a commercial actress and print model, and a 3X author. And her writing has been featured on Huffington Post, Forbes, entrepreneur.com, CBS, and Fox. So, Luci, I'm going to hand the mic over to you. Would you be able to formally introduce yourself and give us, to the listener who's never heard of you before, who's completely new to you, just give us a background of your story and how did you get here being a trauma-informed sex and relationship coach?
Well, let me see. Should we take the long path or the abbreviated one? Well, I think just like a lot of people who end up doing this work, it's like it is that dark night of the soul. It is those, those trying times and those just complete uh, breakdowns of who we think we are that end up leading us to this kind of work. It brings us to a remembrance of the medicine that we're here to bring to the world. So everything that I speak on, I have personally experienced and taken the time to go deeper into the darkness of it and get the gifts from it, get the wisdom from it, and integrate it. It's not a concept or a theory, and I think that's why people feel drawn to it, because they're like, this is really like embodied. It's become me. But yeah, a lot of my own challenges in my marriage, which was 17 years. We can go into that deeper, and through motherhood and through being an entrepreneur, all these different things that have really just naturally kind of redirected me to the path that I'm on now. Because, 12 years ago, I was coaching in a different capacity. I wasn't speaking on eroticism and dark feminine energy and eroticism and all erotic energy. But yes, I really do love to bring people back home, help them come back home to their hearts and feel that erotic aliveness, which is just that, that life source, that nourishment that we all have access to, but we just kind of forget in the throes of life,
Yeah, it feels like today's journey is going to be one of from dark all the way into how to embody your heart. Because
Yeah.
the first question, before we even dive into that erotic liberation that you speak of, the first piece that I'm really curious about is, I've seen you speak a lot about the dark night of the soul. And it's something that I've also, in my own experience, navigated quite a few times and helped other people navigate. And so just to set the context of this conversation, I'm really curious to know, how do you define, so we're all on the same page. How do you define the dark night of the soul? And how did you come to be in such familiarity with it that you can now speak about it so openly and so clearly, and also through your experience, support others through it?
Yes, that's a great question. Okay. So I know that people define it differently. Yes, you got so many good juicy ones. When I think of dark night of the soul, I think of it's not just a night. I think sometimes we have this misconception that it's a moment, a little blip, like you have literally a rough a night or week or month, but sometimes it can last years. It can be, I remember my initial big catalyst was when my former husband, he went through about 2.5 years of depression and disability, and I was the financial provider. He could barely change diapers. We had just had our fourth child. I mean, it just everything came to a head. I developed an autoimmune disorder, and I couldn't even sleep at night. So I had a newborn, I had a 1-year-old, I had 2 kids in school. I was financially trying to make things work in Southern California, which for anyone who knows what that's like, it's just a whole thing of its own. And I felt trapped in my body. That was I would say it's like a rock bottom. It's a rock bottom where you question everything, and everything that you thought that you could rely on, everything that you thought was your foundation, it just isn't. And it's like a dissolution of your sense of identity and your sense of self and what you think is real and what you think is certain. To me, that's a dark night of the soul. And that lasted about 2.5 years. But during that time, I was so just cracked open that I was open to different healing modalities and things that I wouldn't have considered before. I was a pastor's daughter, and I grew up in an evangelical Christian home, and there were a lot of things that were just off limits. I mean, literally everything that I do now, everything that I represent now, everything that I teach would have been off limits. So I had to be just cracked open to that. And it just one thing after another led me to the different things that I eventually learned for myself and received mentorship and teaching for myself. And then I felt like that was so powerful. I wanted to bring it to others. but yeah, I would say it's like a dissolution of who I thought I was to the core and what I thought was certain. And that's a hard thing to navigate. It's you're in the wilderness, and when you have people relying on you, um, and I'm sure we'll get into this more later, but just the process of that is maybe not quite what people think.
What really touches me about what you're sharing about, what that dark night of the soul was for you. And again, I get goosebumps when I even talk about this, is that you were a mom of four children, and a baby, and living in,
Yeah.
I don't live in California, but I do live in Ibiza, which I would argue
Oh,
is
yes,
very,
yes,
very
you get it.
it's up there with the costs. But I remember I went through a dark night of the soul in 2020 right after I had a health crisis and a breakup.
Yeah.
And it felt like I was just dying for, I think, about a
Mm,
year. It was so painful. And what you're sharing now, I just felt all the parts of me that I thought I could rely on were gone. The external people that I thought I could rely on, I couldn't rely on. As I'm sure you've discovered, and
yes.
anyone who's listening has discovered, those are the moments where the people you thought you could lean on, either they show the fuck up, or they
Mm,
go away, and then there's an extra layer of grief of needing to realize and work out the disillusion of maybe relying on somebody and feeling like that relationship wasn't true.
mm,
For me as well, in my personal experience, there was that piece around my health and not even being able to, you said the autoimmune disease, like not even being sure
yeah.
if your body can handle what's going on, which is like the
Yeah.
ultimate
Exactly.
feeling, at least in my experience, the ultimate feeling of me not being safe is the moments when I don't feel safe inside of my own body, which
Yeah.
has been such a huge part of my personal healing journey as well, is
Hmm.
reestablishing that connection to the physical body. And so what really strikes me about what you're saying is, number one, the level of situation that you were in and how freaking like real that is to have four other lives, five, depending on
Hmm.
you, and needing to like make things work and having everything fall around you. And what's really interesting as well is, even like when I think about my dark night of the soul, because you can't compare these things, we're all going through our same experiences, but like when you're suffering, and the
Yeah.
symptoms are the same. And even someone who's like single, like totally at their rock bottom, and then a mom who's totally at the rock bottom, like we're still rock bottoming and there's
Yes,
still
that's
a
true.
very real experience that's happening on a human level. And so I'd be curious if you could share with us, if we zoom in into, a dark night of the soul. And you mentioned a few things. The identity is dissolving. You don't know what to do. You're feeling despair. Can you speak more into what are the symptoms and what were the phases that you went through? Because I'm sure there was like phase one of I'm
Mm,
fucked. And then phase
yes.
two of like, maybe I'm okay. And then phase three of like, oh shit, I fall down again. But there's a point where you like came out, right? And so if we were to zoom into that journey, what did it look like to go from I'm in it really deep to, oh, wait, there's a light. Oh my God, there's more light, and coming out of that tunnel?
Yeah. There are definitely phases. There were definitely stages. I would say it's kind of like, that there are stages of grief. Um,
Mhm.
there was I think it's starting out. Yes, there is oh, fuck, moment where you just feels like everything beneath you is shifting sand and you just can't stand. You just like can't find your footing. But then there comes a moment where it's kind of like you start to, you know what it feels like? It's like surfing. And I remember I started learning how to surf when I was in LA,
Mm.
before moving to San Diego. And one of the key things that I remembered was like when you get just eaten up by a wave, you don't fight it. That makes it harder. You have to surrender into it and just become like a rag doll and just let it have its way with you. And
Mhm.
it'll eventually spit you back out and you can get your breath and you can get going again and get the next wave. Um, it felt a lot like that. And it was initially a lot more resistance. It's the resistance to what is that makes it so much harder. And the more that I fought the reality of what was happening, that made the suffering, that's what made me suffer. And initially, I remember it was almost like a fade into that dark night of the soul, where I didn't quite recognize what was happening, but I knew that things felt harder and harder externally. And I kept waiting for something to change, and it just didn't. And it just kept getting harder and harder. And then we had the baby. And I expected that my body would start to kind of, do what it did the other three times, but it didn't. It just got worse. And I felt more trapped in my body, and I had worse symptoms, and I had like bloody sores all over my body. It was horrible. So at the time, I felt, of course, trapped in my own body because I was having these physical symptoms. And like you mentioned, when you feel like you can't even rely on your body, and your body's turning against you. In fact, it was like no matter what I did, my body was rejecting it. It was just rejecting the whole experience. Um, and also at that time as well, I started to deconstruct my faith. So that had been my number one foundation my entire life. And I'm telling you, I was questioning everything. So I was in the wilderness in all these multiple ways. And especially spiritually, it was like, okay, like around shifting sand, and nothing under my feet was steady. Nothing was certain. The friendships that I thought that I had were not what I thought they had. They were not what I thought they were. I realized that I didn't have the depth of connection with people in my life that I thought I could lean on. And it was just a very lonely time. And eventually I reached a point where I was like, okay, I can surrender into this experience, and I don't have to try to force my way through it. And how can I just soften into this? How can I suffer a little bit less? And I remember I would take my walks along the cliffs with my double stroller, because I had my two little babies right after dropping off the two kids at school, and I would listen to Tony Robbins and Abraham Hicks and all these. I was like, I need different voices in my head than the ones that automatically come and tell me these stories about my suffering. And it's wild to think back on it, because literally everything that I thought I could rely on it felt like it was ripped away. And I was left with this like very just raw, tender feeling in my heart of like, I don't even know what's real. I don't know what I don't know. And so it was actually just one of the greatest gifts of my life, because it was very humbling. And also that cracked openness, that's what I needed to be able to receive, the real love that I'd been wanting for as long as I can remember.
Mm-hmm. Let's zoom in on this because there's some serious gold in here I can feel. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of conversations, what you're saying around like when hardships come, you need to soften. And even, maybe not the surfing metaphor specifically, but when a wave comes, you need to surrender into it. And I've heard
Yeah.
this so many times in so many ways in so many different content creators and in on the internet. Some embody, you can feel their embodiment. Some you're like, this is regurgitating information. Obviously for you it's embodied information, but I am curious, for those who hear these words and they're like, yeah, that sounds great, but how? Like, what are you talking about, lady? What do you mean? Because you don't really know what it means to soften and crack yourself open. I hear the
Yeah.
words, for example, and I remember when before I cracked, I would hear those words and be like, that feels like it sounds true, but like, what does it feel like? And it's like trying to describe
Yeah.
to someone what a banana tastes like. You're not
Yeah.
going to know until you get there. But there are ways to illuminate the path, I feel, to make it maybe not people who are sitting here trying to intellectualize it, but rather people who are going through this or have gone through this or feel like they're about to
Hmm.
go through this, and they want to just like sit in the knowing that they're going to be okay. This is for those
Yeah.
people. Would you be able to, if we were to drop a layer deeper and really look at when you, in those moments where you're questioning yourself and you are in despair, what did that look like? How did that translate into how you interacted with yourself as well as the external world? And
Yeah.
what was the point when you say, like, and then I cracked open and that allowed me to receive love? What does that mean? If there are there any examples of like maybe a moment where you felt that and you realize that, similar to the surfing examples, just something for people
Yeah.
to sink their teeth into, because what you're saying is really important. And I feel that a lot of people collectively right now in this turning over times really need to know how to navigate this.
Yeah. I think a big thing is being present with the pain
Mm.
instead of trying to distract from it. I mean, just in the most practical way to speak on this is in those moments for me when I felt like I wanted to escape the experience or kind of dissociate, because I was really good at that. I used to blame it on I'm a Capricorn, whatever. But I was like, no, that's not it. That's not what
Mhm.
this is. Because I would hide behind my work and I would distract from my feelings by being productive, because I thought that if I did that enough, that would give me a sense of worthiness and give me back that, that certainty that I was so craving. So part of that softening experience is being present with the stuff that's coming up as it's coming up. And it will come up in the most inconvenient moments. And being a mother, it's like, seriously, now when my kid is having a breakdown where they're being a total brat because of this little thing that I didn't like, it's not even a big deal. That is a moment. Every time that my kids had a meltdown, and even now still, it's just that now I have more of the awareness of it. If someone's having an emotional moment and it triggers me and I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? That's me. That's me telling myself, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Just like, I'll give you something to cry about, you know?
Mm.
Those are those moments, those opportunities for anyone listening who is a parent. I mean, that's your daily spiritual practice. Because it's always present there with you. So I would go into deeper into the inner child work. And probably a vast majority of the people listening to a podcast like this are familiar with something like inner child work. But it's not just like you pop into a meditation and you do a guided visualization and you're with your inner child and it's sweet and tender. It's in these moments where you feel unworthy, where you feel like, I don't deserve the love that I want. I'm hard to love. And you take those little opportunities to reparent yourself. And for me too, I started connecting more profoundly with this presence of the great mother. She's the one that channels through me the most now, even with all the erotic things and all the dark, like juicy things. Um, and I started to learn what that felt like in my body, that sense of safety. So a lot of this is really just making the conscious decision to not run away from the pain. And if that particular moment, hey, you're with a client or something and you can't really exactly go deep into your pain, then make it a point to come back later and speak to that part of yourself that is really hurting, that feels rejected, that feels like it's not worth existing. And for me, it was a lot of those micro moments and seeing the gift in the people around me who were mirroring back to me every single day the parts of myself that were hurting. So that softening to me is be having an open, soft heart is choosing to let ourselves feel also the joy. Because for me, the most vulnerable things to feel were actually not my pain. It was the pleasure and the joy and the like, the ecstasy in life. Has been my most vulnerable. But you don't get there if you're in a place listening to this where you're in the despair and you're in the like, I just want to be done with this. I like it. Like, I'll be happy once life is easier. I'll be at peace once this or this happens. You can't even fathom the idea of your pleasure being vulnerable at this point. But I just want to give you some foreshadowing of that. That when
Mhm.
that happens, let it. Let yourself feel it. And I think also that's one of those things we hear a lot, on social media and stuff. It's like, you gotta feel it to heal it. And it's, oh, yeah, sounds nice. But when you're really in those moments, I've had so many moments, Celine, where I have just been broken down on my floor. I've showed up to the mat of my daily spiritual practices for so many years now, and that really carried me through that time. Even when I didn't know who the fuck God was. Like, what is this? What is this bigger power that I'm like hoping is there that I don't even know what to call it? And I let myself just be like literally on my floor, just weeping, just letting out all of these floods of emotions that I didn't know what they were even about. and I didn't have to know.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this too is shifting the dialogue that we're speaking to ourselves about what we're going through. That's why, Tony Robbins in my ear every morning was helpful, because he was like, this isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. And I started to believe it. And I was like, yeah, this is happening for me. I don't get it yet. And another
Mm-hmm.
piece too is that you really do have to have faith in your process, because there is no certainty of how long it's going to last or if you're ever going to come out of it. Maybe your karma in this life is to suffer for the rest of your life. Who knows? I hope not. Probably not. Not many of us would choose that going into this. I mean, I guess I certainly didn't, but a lot of that too is just having faith in your process. Because the definition of faith is like, there is no proof. There is no evidence that this will ever change. And yet I believed. And so we're either really crazy for that, or we're just right on point.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That definitely starts to paint more color into the picture. And I saw a lot of myself in what you were sharing as well. Because I even remember, I mean, even this year, it's been like one hell of a year. 2024 is going
Oh,
down.
it sure
At least
has
in
been.
my record, it's like going
Me
down in the
too.
books.
Yes,
It's
yes,
been really
yes.
challenging. But compared to, for example, the wave that I went through in 2020, or sorry, 2022, it's much more manageable, but not less painful, if
Yes,
that makes sense.
exactly.
And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I remember calling one of my dear friends and just being like, I need some words of affirmation because I'm like not doing good today. And he was like,
Yeah.
Celine, chop wood, carry water. Chop wood, carry water. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, get your sleep, go to the gym, eat well, show up for what you need to show up for, rest when you don't have to be there, but like just basically wake up in the morning, do your
Mm,
practice, like just keep, like what you're saying, just keep coming back to the mat and taking care of your body, taking care of your
yeah.
basics, and just go from there. And it's really interesting because a few weeks later, I went to this local grocery store, and it literally said on the right above the cashier, it says, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And it was this like
Yep.
humbling reminder of, okay, I got it. And even like reflecting back in early 2022 when it was so dark for me. Um, and I
Yeah.
wish I had known this, what I knew now, I wish I had known it back then, was just like, go through the motions, take out for the babies, put in Tony Robbins in your ear,
Yeah.
just like focus on that
Yeah.
first, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. And something that my own experiences have taught me, of just going through tremendous amounts of pain, is the importance of staying present and not dissociating and not leaving and abandoning yourself again,
Mm-hmm.
because of the fear of that experience, which is
Yeah.
so often coming from the past, coming from a memory and something that's not even real in the present moment. So that's what that reminds
Exactly.
me of. And then, something that does feel real in the present moment that I love for you to share, speak into, is, and I know this is also such a situation for so many people, what you shared about, you were the financial provider and you had to take care of five people, because on one hand, it's really easy to say, hey, come back to the mat, get your water, get your sleep. Like, okay, I can do that. You know what I mean? But there's so many people that are like,
Yeah.
yeah, but I've got this amount of kids. I need to support my husband. Okay, there's a very real practical issue here that is the reality of so many people is money. So how do I take care
Mm-hmm.
of myself through this dark night of the soul when I literally have a bill that needs to get paid this month and I don't feel like working? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm curious if you can speak into your experience of how you navigated that and lifted out of that for the people who are like, this sounds great, but it also sounds like a first world problem. And what about the practical reality of what I'm going
Survival.
through? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that wasn't an issue because I had people that here's the thing I like to come back to is there's a difference between I feel like doing this and I want to be doing this. And so I got to learn very intimately what that distinction was because most of the time I didn't feel like it. I didn't feel like showing up, but I wanted to because I had this fire lit under my ass of these people who were relying on me. And I would look at them and say, like, there's no way that I'm going to let you down. So sometimes I've had people say, you know, it's easier for me to have shown up consistently because I had people relying on me. Whereas if they didn't have people relying on them, they would be more susceptible to just kind of giving up. And I do see that perspective. I do agree to that. I get that. Because if it wasn't for them, I don't know that I would have been motivated to actually get up and do what needed to be done. I might have just, I have no idea. But I think that also people recognizing that there is a difference between feeling like doing something and that like something in you is like, let's fucking go, let's do this. And for me, that's why those morning practices were so crucial because that would set the tone for my entire day. And I knew that if I could at least just show up for that, and I was at that time, I was approaching it more from a, you know, physiological, scientific standpoint of like, if I get up and I do my movement and my exercise and whatever, I get the BDNF going in my brain, I get my blood flow going, I get some endorphins, I get some, you know, like all this stuff. I didn't realize that on a spiritual and energetic level, I was like really kind of hyping myself up, you know, to show up for my day. And meditating, I thought, oh, this is helping me to do this and this and this, but I didn't realize it was actually helping me on a deeper level. So things like that, I think sometimes, again, like just we underestimate the power of those small daily rituals and how they influence the rest of the day. So, I mean, you just got to show up. For me, I kept following the influence of the inner guidance system of here, do this for work. Because I've been an entrepreneur for 12 years now. So I was self-sustained throughout that entire time. And you can't just afford to not work. You know, I still showed up for clients. I still went to news station interviews. I still wrote my books. I still did all these things because I just felt like, where's that little bit of magic in me that wants to come out? How does it want to come out today? How does that magic want to show up today? And honestly, that kept me going. Because I never lost, like, even when it felt like so tiny that I could barely see it, there was always still that connection to the magic. And now that's like that's my whole life, you know? But if I could just see a little sliver of the light in this giant dark tunnel that I was in, I was like, oh, there it is. And then I would just kind of try to widen it a little bit so I could see a little better what that thing is. And as someone who needs to create, to feel in flow, I kept that going, whatever that looked like every day. So for people to find what that thing is for them, like how does that magic, how does that love want to express through them? Because that in itself is nourishing and it's healing and it keeps you going. It's yeah, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing that when you were going through that period and going through the practice of getting on your mat and sharing a little bit of magic every day, you did not, or maybe you did. If you didn't, let me know. But what I'm hearing is that you didn't have this framework. For example, if we fast forward to today and we look at your Instagram, we look at your product suite, we look at like, oh, this is what Luci does. This is what her brand is. This is what she stands for. These are like the themes that are in her brand. I'm guessing that you didn't know that when you were in that mush. Is that right? Like you didn't have that. It's not like you had a clear vision that you're like, okay, exactly. I just gotta like get myself out of this thing. And, one day I will be, showing up on Instagram this way and having this thing on my website. I'm guessing you didn't know.
No concept.
Right?
There was no concept.
So can you walk us through, like, you're in this smush and you're like, I don't know, I'm just trying to like every day just, go through the motions and write a little bit and do just a little bit of magic. Like, can you walk us through the process where, or maybe either it was a gradual process or maybe it was like a eureka moment, but basically that place where you found yourself being in that space of, oh, this is what my offerings are. Like, this is how I'm showing up in life. What did that look like for you to find your footing once again?
I mean, it was always pivoting. It was always shape-shifting depending on where I was in my season of life as well. Like, for example, I remember there was a time where I got the direct message to start a YouTube channel. And so I just did that, and I just trusted that. I think also this speaks a lot to when you really trust that inner guidance, and kind of like you reaching out. You're like, okay, fine. I know that this is not the usual way that I do things, but I clearly feel this pull. And it was like that for me. Like my whole life is like that, to be quite frank. And it's been like that for as long as I can remember. But it was more loud during that period of time because I had nothing else. I had no other compass except for that inner compass, and there was no one who had done what I was in the process of doing that I could look to and say, oh, this is what they did. So let me just, what's the next step? No, I was just completely in this wilderness, and I just had to make peace with that, first of all. Also, I have a lot of Scorpio in my chart, so I'm here to be an alchemist, and I'm here to be in the mystery and in the underworld of things, and to get the gifts of the darkness and just be comfortable sitting, like not seeing a single damn thing. And I had to really, 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 really learn that during that time. But yeah, I would just get a ping, and then from that YouTube channel, for example, I started getting the inspiration to create this course based on the feedback I got back from viewers. And then I got this, download. It was like, oh, we need to make a shadow work course. Okay, I'll make the shadow work course, and then make an inner child course, and then make a self-pleasure course. And I do also want to emphasize that the space that we receive these messages, for me, it came within my practices. So having that commitment, that self-discipline to show up to my practices every day, I cannot emphasize that enough. There came a point too where part of my daily spiritual practice was my self-pleasure practice. And that's actually where I got my best ideas. So I'm open, because in that space, I'm open to receiving, and I'm open to what the universe is wanting to like seed me with, like I'm literally physically open. So that's been, I would say, my most powerful practice overall. But yeah, you just take it one step at a time. And that became my whole life mantra was, I'm just going to take this one step because this is the next right step. For anyone who's watched Frozen 2, is it? It's like, just do the next right thing that you feel like is a yes. And then you keep trusting.
You know what I love about what you're sharing? It reminded me of something that happened a while back where I was going through just a difficult financial situation that came up. And I've been doing like Latin dancing this past year, and salsa bachata. And I remember I'm like, okay, soul, I'm doing my prayers. I'm like, soul, I'm committed. I'm committed to like resolving this situation. Just tell me what to do today.
Yeah.
And then my soul's like, go dancing tonight. I'm like, wait, this is not what I was looking for.
I need the 5-year plan. I need the 5-year plan.
Yeah, it's like, I need a plan. Like, do I need to send out an email? Do I need to like put out an offer about this thing? Like, what do I need to do here? And then I was like, go dancing. And I'm like, this is really not cool, but okay, I'll do it. And then I remember, and that's just how funny how the ego like keeps wanting, we want an answer. The mind wants structure. It wants a plan. It wants certainty. And the soul's like, let's go dancing. And I remember there was this moment I just go dancing, and I love it. I'm having the blast. I'm having the best time. And then there's this moment where one of my partners, as I was relatively new, he's like, hey, you need to give me more tension with your hand, because if you don't give me more tension, then you won't know where I'm leading you. And I was like, oh, I got it. I got what I needed to do, because I realized that I just kept like, even if we look at it, masculine, feminine polarity, I was getting pressured, and I wanted to like be my feminine, but I was collapsing. And so I couldn't like, in the pressure of what was happening, I couldn't even see where I was going, because I wasn't like creating tension as in the feminine. Like I wasn't pushing back, and it's not even about the pushing, because in it's polarity dancing, in Latin dance, it's like the man leads you, so the man's totally in the lead, but if you want to know where he's taking you, you've got to give him some kind of tension, so he can lead you, and so you can pick up on the cues, because if you're just like collapsed, then you can't read what he's telling you, right? And so in that moment, I'm like, oh my God, I need to give it tension. And then I got it. I got what the answer was, and my intuition led me there. Soul was like, go dancing, because I needed to pick
Yes,
up
yes.
this one piece that gave me the solution. And it's the same thing when even a few months ago, I got this intuitive download. It was like, go to Scotland. I'm like, why do I need to go to Scotland? It's like, go to Scotland. And then I went to Scotland and I
Yeah.
went to quote unquote pick up some codes that
Mm,
I needed around home and around like where I needed to settle myself for the next few months. And so
yeah.
there's all this information that I was trying to get the answer to through with my mind. But when I like just
Mm,
surrendered to soul, the answers came, but it requires such a deep listening that is not like
yes.
waiting for, it's not waiting. Soul's not going to spit out like a quarterly plan for you. It's going
Right,
to give
right.
you a message exactly the way that you need to receive it to like deeply, deeply be able to understand what's actually being communicated with you. So
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yes.
that's what I wanted to share on that. And you know, I'm curious, like slightly pivoting directions is so now that we've spoken about the dark night of the soul, I'm really curious because you were talking about your Scorpio placements, how part of your work is to be in the underworld. I bet I don't have as many Scorpio placements as you, but me too, sister. That's definitely part of my
Yeah.
role in this lifetime. I spent a lot of time down there. So I'm curious if you can share more about that transition into the work that you do around, eroticism and helping women awaken to and embody their dark feminine, and how why that's important.
Yeah. I mean, that was what set the foundation for being able to connect with that erotic energy, which, if we just define what erotic is, it's not limited to the sexual. The erotic is, it's like I'm in an erotic environment right now. And actually, we just recently moved to South America. So we're in a very lush, erotic, just the aliveness. And and also, I do want to say, for anyone who wants to go deeper into the eros, there is a book that really helped put things together for me in a powerful way called A Return to Eros. Mark Gaffney and Christina Kincaid. A little bit lengthy, but 100% worth the read. And it's really about this connection to the heart of life itself. And when we're in survival mode, when we're in the space of trying to, when let's see, diverting so much of our energy into trying to repress our pain and run away from it and numb it and pretending like everything's okay when it's not, like that is so energetically siphoning. So when you liberate that energy, the more that you just let yourself feel. So again, getting back on the mat every day and getting vulnerable with yourself, getting vulnerable with spirit, with your guides, with your ancestors, whatever you're working with, whomever, and um, and just letting that just further open you. And like physically, I would feel in my body this like opening, this exhale in my energy. Um, and that I began to feel more things. I remember I learned Reiki and I learned, Reiki master, and I did all these things. And again, just part of the natural evolution of what my path led me to. And I would be doing Reiki on myself and I'd be doing energy work and I started flowing with it and moving and self pleasuring. And I would keep tapping into something deeper and deeper and deeper. And I will say too that initially it can feel scary because you don't know exactly what you're tapping into. And it's like, oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to go there. I don't know if I should explore my darker fantasies, for example. I don't know if I should let myself, just really go there. But when you do and you confront what you perceive to be the monster in you, and you realize that it only takes on the form of a monster because you have made it a monster, and you start to befriend that monster and you dance with it. And I know I'm kind of getting, esoteric with this, but, I think a lot of you will follow here. Um, that gives you this innate permission feeling to explore those darker edges that actually do feel like home because you're like, oh, this is me being at home in my body. So the more I did that with myself, now granted, I did do a lot of work in, say, conscious kink. I did do a lot of work with my clients in the healing kink space and in my own life. And so that actually was a very sacred space for me to open up to what I perceived like, oh, this is like the dark, scary, taboo stuff.
Mhm.
And then it doesn't become so taboo, and you're just and then there's not this fear around it anymore, and it's just this extra powerful source of love because the darkness itself is nourishment, and the darkness is this fertile soil. So
Mhm.
yeah, a lot of this really, when we do begin to crack open the shame around our sexuality in particular, the more we're able to free that energy and just have it fueling our whole lives. So I do still like to bring it back to the sexual healing component, because I don't think that there's a way to skip over that and have all of this like yummy light love. Um, and that is a lot of the work that I do now, is especially helping women um, explore and become familiar with the gifts of what they have learned is taboo or off limits, which is also just not just the pleasure and the fantasies and all this stuff, and what is your fantasy pointing you on a deeper desire level, but also our rage, our grief, all of these things that we've been taught are too much, and that we just haven't been able to give space to exist
Mhm.
safely.
Mhm. Yeah. Beautiful. What this reminds me of is, some what many indigenous cultures believed in was that sexual energy is life force energy. Like to them, that was
Yes.
not separate. Sexual
Mm-hmm.
energy is life force energy. And one of the reasons why I'm so interested in this topic and, went down the Tantra practitioner path for a couple of years, and also why I invite so many specialists around this topic onto the podcast is because I have experienced time and time and again the ways that um, to come into deeper embodiment and deeper communion with our sexual energy actually allows us to unlock deeper parts of ourselves and different layers of our self expression in a way that feels really, really healthy. But unfortunately, for so many people, we grew up in a society where that was not available. We grew up in a society where sexuality was shamed, where sexuality was a bad thing, something that you had to hide underneath. And what I understood, having done the work I've done now around sexuality, is that that is a way to quite literally repress our life force energy. And when we repress our life force energy, then we repress our self expression and we repress the potentiality of all that we are here to be.
Hello, Soul Family. I hope you're loving this episode so far. Before we dive back in, I'd love to share with you one of my most popular and beloved free resources on how to stand out and magnetize your dream clients with your irresistible story. Because here's the thing, you have a powerful story inside of you. There's no doubt about that. But the question is, are you telling it in a way that empowers you? And not only that, that connects with and compels your audience. Whether you are a business owner or a leader who's in charge of influencing others, this masterclass will propel you in the direction of becoming someone who tells compelling stories that change people's lives, starting with your own. This is the secret sauce to standing out in a crowd of sameness and being seen as a go-to expert. Because here's the truth. If you don't own your story, it will own you. So if you're ready to step into your truth and tell your story unapologetically and confidently without the wobbles, start here. Go to the show notes or type in the link, celinedacosta.com/free masterclass to dive in. Enjoy. And now let's get back into the episode.
So, with all of that being said, I am curious about when you say the dark and scary places of ourselves. Could you give us some examples of what that could look like, even for the women and men out there listening, being like, "Hold on, what is this dark stuff this lady's talking about?" And what is it, to go there, for us to go into these dark places? How is that actually serving our self expression? Would you be able to help us connect the dots there?
Yeah. So one of the three, let's say, I like to bring it back to these three examples of our feminine expression, which yes, the men can relate to in their own way as well. This is 100% not just for women. But so let's say, for example, like my inner slut, right? There was a part of me that just insatiable, right? And I think that having grown up in the context that I did, right, that part was bad. That part can actually damn my soul for all eternity. So of course I didn't want to explore that. That part felt very unsafe. There was nothing about that was like, oh, yes, this is spiritual, this is godly. So exploring that part and seeing, what is the deeper soul expression that my core being wants me to experience through my inner slut. Like it's what I learned about myself. For example, I had this fantasy, if I can go there, if that's okay.
Go there.
About I don't know, who knows like what a bukkake is, but it's no longer, it doesn't do anything for me now, but it's like you just have all these men kind of just doing their thing on you. That was my biggest fantasy.
A bukkake. Oh my God, look at
Bukkake. Yeah.
Wow, I learned something new.
Right?
Please go on. That's
You
really
learned
good.
something today. Okay. You learned something today. And so there was that. And I thought, what is it about that? Just first of all, letting myself be turned on by that and letting myself explore like, oh, how does this feel in my body? And then feeling the feelings of shame, the feelings of disgust, the feelings of what is wrong with me, And then getting the deeper gift. And I'm giving this very specific example because I hope that this connects. It doesn't have to be this particular in a sexual fantasy, but there are a lot of gifts there, I will say. And what I learned about myself was I was craving to just receive from life, from the universe. Like there's this part of me that felt too vulnerable to just be able to admit that. And it lived in my sexual fantasy. So what's interesting is that, and this isn't always the case, but the more that I did just own that in my life, the less I felt actually turned on by that sexual fantasy. And then that created a whole other experience for me of like, oh, well, what am I into now? Like, who am I as a sexual being if I don't like this? Because I've secretly liked this for so long that I don't even know how to get off now, So then that helped me to connect deeper with my body and feel the deeper orgasm instead of just the mental, quick, path to climax. So there's just so much in that, and more than we can go into here. But that's what I mean. That's one example of going into the dark places that we feel like, oh, that's taboo. That's like, oh, that's naughty. But also, another big thing that uncorked a lot for me was letting myself feel rage and letting myself get angry about, the way that my father treated my mother and the way that she just took it and the way that he abandoned our family and, all these things that I had been justifying, intellectualizing since childhood, because yes, everyone's doing the best that they can, but my little girl heart was just hurting. It was broken. And so letting myself feel that too, that unleashes so much eros. That just clears the energetic channels. So, just letting ourselves feel the darker things. So the inner slut, another one that I really found powerful to go into was my inner witch, right? Because there was a lot in that was taboo. Like you don't want to mess with those energies. And reclaiming my medicine woman through that. And then another one yet is, I talk about this in my Wild Feminine course, is the crazy bitch. So for me, my biggest fear was insanity, because that's how I lost my father. And eventually, that's what happened to my ex-husband as well. Not actual insanity, but there were mental health things that took him away from us. So that was my biggest fear. And interestingly, if I had not gone deep into that, the dark space, that was the darkest space I ever confronted on a medicine journey as well, was this fear of actual insanity, of losing my mind, of going too far. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been able to navigate my divorce the way that I did, because that was the most tender space that went back decades to my relationship with my father. So I think also doing this deeper work within whatever context you're in, those of you listening, whether you're single or you're married or you're a parent or you're with roommates or you live with your parents, I trust that is the perfect container for you to go deeper into. And that really prepared me for the biggest shakeup of my whole life, having done that work for years within the marriage. So Yeah. Yes. Anything that you want to go deeper into there?
Yeah. I mean, I would love to respond to all three of these examples that you've given me. The first one with the sacred slut, and it really makes sense what you're saying, because in my work as a subconscious reprogramming expert, one of the things that I've noticed is that the more we suppress certain belief systems, certain desires within ourselves, the first place they'll like slip into, they'll go into the unconscious, and it'll go right into sexuality. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's the, like your sexuality is the perfect hiding place for all of those belief systems, desires, like deep yearnings, deep vulnerabilities that you're not yet willing to look at or be with. And so even when
Mm-hmm.
we go into the world of kink, we go into these, even before that, like people having these secret fantasies, like the one that you just shared, that they are just unwilling to even speak out loud to a partner. What I've noticed
Yeah.
and what comes to light as you're speaking into this, it's that it wasn't the bukkake per se, but it was there's actually a desire underneath that, a really deep, vulnerable desire that you haven't even fully claimed for yourself yet, that then your mind manifests as, oh, well, clearly this must be the solution for me to get that thing that I
Yes.
want, you know? Like that's
Yeah.
clearly it's just going to be a bunch of like men doing things to me. Like that's how I'm going to feel the way I want to feel.
I
When
need to be a cum
actually,
dumpster. That's
exactly. When actually you just want to feel the way you want to feel. And then your mind's like, oh, here's the story of how I could feel that way. And because it's such a taboo feeling that
yes.
you want, that like level of being so cracked open, so vulnerable, so like overwhelmed by passion and love, is something that your mind at that current state of consciousness is interpreting as being so inaccessible that the only way you could access it is by creating this like very out of far reach story that now you need to either torture yourself because you want it but you can't tell anyone about it, or you're like looking for secret ways to get it, even that nobody ever finds out about. So it's like we create these like almost self-contained torture chambers of how am I ever going to get this, how am I going to gather this many men and have it all be confidential and have the thing that I'm imagining happen exactly as I'm imagining, and then when that day comes, finally I'll be liberated. Like that's what we do in the back end, you know? And so what I love about what you're saying is like creating that safety within yourself to go there, either literally creating the experience that you're desiring of, or if you are desiring of that experience, but you don't actually want it, it's about how do you take yourself there to really feel those feelings that you're actually wanting to feel through having that experience. So it's like dropping the experience and allowing yourself to feel a feeling, or sometimes we just need to have the experience. And then we either get the feeling and understand that it's fleeting and temporary, and we're going to need to recreate that experience again in order for us to feel that way again, in which case that will send us off on another journey of actually just learning how to feel the feeling and be in that deep, raw vulnerability. So that's what I love about this example of the sacred slut. It's like, follow your desires all the way down into that dark, like scary place. And again, I'm not advocating for you to like, if your dark desire
go
is
do the
something
thing.
that, you know, is out of agreement, maybe you have a partner and it's out of the field of agreement. I'm not, you know, advocating that you go and break that field of agreement, but follow it like in your psyche. Let yourself go there on your meditation mat, you know, so you can really explore what is that gift, what is it that life is trying to tell you, that you really truly want beyond that experience. You know, I'm a big fan of for example, shibari. I love shibari. I'm super into
I
it.
love it.
And when yeah, it's like so amazing. And you know, I followed down that rabbit hole, and it's really that like deep craving for surrender. It's that deep craving for surrender. So, you know, I might not be able to have a shibari master come to my house every night and tie me up. But there are different ways that I can lean into learning how to experience that deep craving of being fully supported and surrendered to life, you know? And then I also get to enjoy shibari when that comes along, you know?
Yes, and then it's bonus, but you don't have to wait until that to get the feeling. Because I remember the first
because
time
then
I
you're
was fully
codependent.
suspended. Oh,
Exactly.
yes,
It's like
and
I got to
then my peace
codepend.
depends on that.
Yeah, it's like until the day that the next shibari master comes into town and the next workshop is, I will just be waiting to surrender. It's like, no, that's not how we want it. We want it accessible to us at
No.
all times. that full
Yeah, but then those
spectrum.
experiences, they help you to embed the feeling in your body
Yeah,
of like, oh,
exactly.
this is what it feels like, and then you can take that wherever. Because yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
Because there was a period of a couple of years where I really felt drawn to doing as much rope and suspension as going to events and leading events and co-leading events, and that was kind of like just me catching up on what that experience is like. But also to your
Mm,
point, yes, I really want to emphasize that it doesn't mean that we need to go out and do the thing, and we always want to honor our integrity and our agreements first. And
mhm,
sometimes, you try the things that you think you want, that you consciously are aware that you want, and you realize that that's not what you want. Like, for example, there was a period of time where Ryan and I, my former husband, did open our marriage because I thought, oh, I think I want this. I did not want this. I did not find a single person that I felt like I wanted to sexually engage with the entire time. And I realized I am a deeply monogamous person, it turns out.
mhm.
So sometimes you just don't know, but always within that communication and clarifying the agreements and being very, very honest. And that is the work that I found myself doing a lot with couples too during that time. So
Mhm,
that's what I mean.
mhm,
The material changes depending on the
mhm.
context.
Beautiful. And the other one is the crazy bitch. That's another one I want to touch into,
Yes,
because that
yes.
was such a fear of mine as well. And I actually remember I had an ex-boyfriend who said, he said to me, my greatest fear is losing my mind. And he actually reflected that
Mm.
exactly to me. And I remember one time we went on a medicine journey. I just lost my
Oh boy.
mind. And he was like, at the tail end of that, I was like, I need to thank you because you helped me get rid of the biggest fear I've ever had in my life. Like, it's gone now. I saw you lose your mind and it's not that
Yeah.
bad. I remember him saying that.
If that's what it
And then
looks like, we can make it.
he's like, oh, that? Okay, I could do that. That's no problem. And then I remember with the same partner, and I've done a podcast episode on this once where I accidentally took acid, like no idea. Never took acid in my life.
Oh,
Didn't know
oh
it came. I
no.
drank a bottle of water. It was full of like a double dose of acid. And I did a
Oh,
whole episode on this for those who are interested on when that time I accidentally dropped acid. It's called, and I remember just getting to this place where I was looking outside and like I could see all the sacred geometries and just the patterns and reality just defragged in front of me, and I'm like, I'm insane. I have lost my mind. And I was completely in my center. And I thought to myself, I've lost my mind. I'm out. I'm going to a psychiatric ward. And I was totally at peace with that. I was totally cool with that. And that experience completely liberated me in a whole new level in my
yeah.
self-expression. And then of course there's still layers to go. But after that, I'm like, I don't fucking care. I'm gonna say what I need to say.
Yes.
Because I've experienced
Yes.
what it's like to be crazy, and it was not that bad. So it was
Yeah.
that's
I
what your
lost my
story
mind and I
reminded me.
came back.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
came back
Yeah.
and I was better for it. And it's interesting how like our fears, like even speaking into your story, those deep dark fears that we like hold inside with really deep force are exactly the
Yeah.
ones that get manifested. And I want to share this with you and who's listening. This is a bit of a vulnerable share because you share with us about like how that crazy bitch got like it was being manifested and reflected back to you precisely because you were hiding
Yeah.
from that part of you so much that it hit you in the face really hard. Well, one of the things I wanted to share, and that's why I left the inner witch for last, is in my last relationship, such a beautiful, beautiful relationship, and also Catholic background. Those things where you think you're over that Catholic background and you're spiritual, but then you're very still
Yeah.
entrenched in the
But then it
dogma of
comes
it.
up and you're like,
It,
oh,
it comes up in the weirdest of ways. I had an experience where I'd always been very hesitant to come out in my inner witch, and even when I spoke about
mm-hmm.
my intuition and I speak about I guess the medicine woman archetype of me has been very like fragmented in the sense that she comes out and then goes back into hiding, and she comes out and then goes back into hiding. And I had this experience where he would lovingly call me his witch, but then was so scared of like very seemingly innocent things. Like if I left a crystal in his apartment, he's like, please get this
Mm.
crystal out of the apartment because of the voodoo that it might create, I woke up twice in our relationship in the middle of the night at 3:30 in the morning, and I was speaking in my
Mm.
sleep, and apparently that was me casting some weird kind of demonic spell. And
Oh.
I got so much I remember feeling so hurt because I felt rejected in my medicine, and just realizing, like, wow, why is it that I am manifesting this external representation of
Mm.
a man who won't look me in the eye the next morning, that I woke up at 3:30 in the morning because apparently I was casting spells, and maybe I was, but I don't think it was for it were the worst, so
Yes, it was
so
for
yeah.
in good service, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious about, on that note, like, I'm curious about your experience with I'm sure you see this a lot, both with men and women,
Hmm.
about this fear that and I'd love it if you could speak from both perspectives, both the woman, for example, in my case, who's like, "Ugh, I don't know if I can come out in this way," but also for our brothers out
Yeah.
there who seem to be very afraid of women, of the medicine woman. Be curious to hear about your experience on that, and how you've supported people to lift out of that.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing is that there was again, like going to the spiritual wilderness of um of not knowing if the energy that I was feeling drawn to was safe. Like, is this some kind
Mm.
of evil entity trying to beguile me and fool me and, like, seduce me? And what I realized too, and this was before I ever got into plant medicine as well, interestingly, and this just further took me deeper into that with plant medicine when I eventually did do that, um, is that it's the fear of it and the fear around it that is dangerous. Um,
It's the
when
hook.
we are sucked into that fear, yeah, it's the fear
Yeah.
that is seductive. It's the fear that sucks us into these lower density energies, things like that. Um, when you see, and when you're intentional, I think this is really the entry point I want to go with here. Is when you're clear on your intention of, I'm going into, let's say I had this visual of a big cave that I was going spelunking into, and it's this dark, dark, pitch dark place. I don't know what's down there, but I feel like I need to go explore. And so these are the depths of my psyche, these like energies that I'm like feeling drawn. Again, with so much Scorpio, I'm meant to be in that darkness and not be afraid, and just be at home in there. Not like that is my home now, but I want to feel at home there, so I'm not afraid of it. So I can go there anytime I need to access that without being like, I don't know if I can do it, and then be afraid and carry that fear in there with me. So this visual came to me in one of these heart journeys that I did, again, without plant medicine. So wild how this happened. It was completely spirit led. Um, I went on these journeys almost on a daily basis during one period of time. And it was like I was attached by this cord of light. So no matter how deep I went into this cave, there was always a way out. I've spoken with people who, even relatives of mine, they're like, wow, when I go into these dark places in a medicine journey, actually, I feel like I'm consumed by the darkness and I can't get out. And it's terrifying. And then the shaman eventually has to bring me out. And they're like, because I don't know how to do it. But it's like this part of me, again, spirit led, it was like, here, you're in this bungee cord. I am the light also. I grew up my whole life being told by my mother, you are the light. This is why I named you what I named you. So I had this intention of like, I'm okay. No matter what, I am the love, I am the light, and I can go into this darkness and I am completely safe and I'm completely held. And so going into it with that intention also, it shifts everything, and it helped me to realize how much fear was being projected onto the darkness, that it's just like going into a womb. Is the womb evil because it's dark? No. You're being shaped, you're being formed, you're about to be born. And I think that going into these deep medicine spaces within our hearts, it feels really vulnerable because we are confronted with our fear. And when we realize that the fear is what creates, like, it's not real, the fear, yes, the fear is a real experience that we're having, but the illusions that it creates are not real. And when I learned how to hold this kind of paradox of, this feels real and the feelings are real, but this is not the ultimate truth. And I actually took that into my plant medicine journeys eventually, and that helped me a lot, because otherwise, you know how it can be so scary when you're in these places and everything's like, oh, this is my reality now, I've gone insane, oh no. But it helps us to come to a place of peace sooner, and acceptance. And then there's like this lift, and we realize, oh, that wasn't even real. Like really, really true.
Mm-hmm. 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 So what I'm hearing is really, and this even connects, at least for me, around the importance of creating safety within your body. I love the
Yeah,
reframe that you've made, is that when we go into these really dark corners of ourselves, it's like it's going into a womb, and it's really going into this like deep excavation of, because it's all us. It's not anything outside of us. It
yes,
is all us.
exactly.
And that fear that we have of going into that dark place is, again, just a fear of ourselves. But what I'm also hearing is that when the intention is there, and when you're leading yourself from your heart, it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
hard to get lost, because the heart is the light. That, like, being in the heart is the light, and it allows us to actually navigate even the darkest corners of our psyche and come out on the other side. And this reminds me also of the jaguar medicine. And I remember it was 2017, and I was in Guatemala, and this was even before the time of me doing medicine journeys, or being really like involved in the spiritual age. And I happened to stumble upon a shaman, and this was without, she was just, I met her in a very casual way, and we dove deep into a Mayan. She did my Mayan oracle, and she remembers her saying to
Oh,
me, Celine, like, you're a jaguar woman, like that's your medicine. It's the medicine of the jaguar. I'm like, what are you talking about, lady? Like, what does that even mean? And she said to me, it's your ability to navigate the darkest corners of your heart and come out on the other
mm,
side, because that's what the jaguar does. And when it's sunset, when the sun is setting, it goes on in the underworld, and it fights the evil
yeah.
spirits. It like makes its way through, and every sunrise the jaguar rises back up again. Clean, every sunrise it comes back into the day, into the upper worlds. And what you're sharing with that really brought up that metaphor of the jaguar that goes into those deep corners of the heart. And whatever fear, whatever demon needs to be confronted, gets confronted, and then you still come out on the other side. But now you have all of the gifts, all of the lessons. Even as you were saying, the gift of going into that dark, scary corner of, why do I have this weird, desire with all these men? Like, this is weird. Like, why is this happening? And when you wade beyond the shame and the fears, you actually see that, oh, actually underneath that, there's just a deep desire to like be held by life in a certain way. And that's the gift that you get to take with you and implement in your everyday life. So that's what that brought up for me.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And so it's not like we're now, this is our new reality and we're just like in the dark existing there, but we are getting the gifts from there, and we're realizing, oh, this is actually what this deeper thing is calling me into. Like, what's that
Mm,
medicine that I have been disowning because I've been afraid to look at the surface level of it, because that's
mm,
bad.
mm, mhm, mhm. So I want to ask you a question around the dark feminine and dark masculine. So since we are on the topic of sexuality and darkness, but I want to pre-frame it with a short story of how I've seen. When I tell you the story, it'll make sense why I'm asking the question. So, for example, I remember I was having a session with a man, and we were talking about his story, but then of course we excavated, and really went deep into the fact that he was attracting very disembodied women that were more in their light feminine, because he himself hadn't claimed his own dark masculine, and he also carried this fear of that dark feminine energy. And I've noticed this many times, even when I'm working with clients, I'm usually, working with them through sharing their story, but especially with men, I've noticed that there's a pattern that whatever's happening in their business, when we actually zoom in and look at their sexual relationship with women, the answers are usually there as to like however they're relating to women, is creating that blockage that they're facing in their business. It's really fascinating. I don't know if you've noticed this
Yes.
as well, but I find that men, men and women, I don't want to gender stereotype, but I found that specifically very successful high level men, they go into business and then you notice that there's the underbelly of their relationships and sexuality that needs resolution, and then things start to pick up in business again. So I'd be curious if you could speak
Yes.
into this experience of why is it that men, first of all, would you be able to define, just so we all are talking about the same thing in your terminology, light feminine, light masculine, dark feminine, dark masculine, just so everybody on this, maybe people who have not heard of this before, understand like what we're speaking into? And how have you seen this play out with men who haven't embraced their dark masculine, or women who haven't embraced their dark feminine? Like, how does that actually create distortion? Like, how does that distortion show up, and how to resolve that?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of this too comes down to our relationship with power and the power struggle within. And the biggest thing that I see that keeps men and women, from really embodying and owning our darker energy, which it's not necessarily like it's just the erotic, like seductive, all that, but it's these parts that are a little edgy, that we're like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to desire to be in power. You know, what I find is that, let's speak specifically for men, right? It's the men who have yet to really get really honest with themselves about any inkling of desire that they have to have power over someone else. There's a part of them that gets off on that aggression. I wouldn't trust a man who doesn't have a good relationship with his aggression, who claims that he doesn't have any. Because even that's why we don't trust the nice guys. It's not because they're nice. It's because you can sense that there's this part of themselves that they're completely disowned, because you can be kind and you can show up as a kind person and have this connection there. That's your integrity. But when they can own up to, okay, I do, there's some part of me that is like, enjoys being in power over a woman, for example. And I know this is can be very edgy conversation, especially in our collective today. And that doesn't mean that defines him. That doesn't mean that is how he needs to act and take action from that desire. But just acknowledging, even if there's a 1% desire of that, and just saying, oh, okay, what is it that part of me is looking for? What does that part of me find safety in having power over my partner, for example? And same for women too, because for me, that was a big thing. That was a big internal power struggle of like, I want to be in control, but I also resented, let's say, him for not taking more control. Mm-hmm. And then that is just me having that power struggle with power itself. Again, this could go I want to make this more practical and less just theoretical. Having those conversations with the parts of ourselves that need control to feel safe. That is a big access point to reclaiming these darker energy, the darker masculine, the darker feminine, so that those parts of us don't subconsciously act out, because they will find a way, one way or another, to be expressed. And so with the dark masculine, let's say in the context of sex, right? Because this just make it very clear. When you are with a man or a lover who can be rough with you, give you a bite on the neck, but not too hard. He's not going to draw blood, but enough to show that aggression, but that he has the self-restraint. Not only does he have the connection to his aggression, but he has the self-restraint, and he's not caught up in the me equation. He's caught up in the us. He's attuned to the us. what in this moment serves the energy of us, not just what is my impulse that I need to just bite you because I'm. So these are the moments where you can really feel someone's embodiment with their dark feminine or masculine. And in the boardroom, same thing. When someone can get passionate without being overwhelmed by that, and they know how to harness that energy and channel it with focus, with vision, with precision, you know those actors or those speakers that can do that, and they can just embody that passion, but then they can rein it in. You can tell they've done some work with this part of themselves behind the scenes. And yeah, that absolutely does affect. I think what happens in business is mirrored back in relationship, and vice versa. What you're attracting in your experience as a business person is going to be interestingly reflected in your partnership. So just being aware of that, I think people can go a lot deeper into what their next material that the universe is giving them to work on.
And I would, add to that, or this is a comment / question, which is that when people are not embodied in their dark masculine feminine, when they don't have a healthy relationship with that, they'll either go on to attract that unhealthy dark, masculine feminine in their partnership, or I would even say, and correct me if I'm wrong, the opposite, where they need to have that super light to feel very safe.
Yes.
And not even touch the cacophony that comes with that dark, this embodied dark archetype.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. You'll find that it's one end of the spectrum or another. Yeah.
Like either they're super, super nice couple where you're like, just tear each other apart already, like just pleasing each other all day. Or, the go to the back room, please, you need it. Or, the ones that are like super toxic and you're like, I can't, like you guys are moving train wreck, please stop.
Yes. And it's rare. It's more rare to find that integrated, embodied balance, not balance, but the harmony of these energies, where it's really the bigger question for me had become, it became, what is in service to love? What is in the highest service to love in this moment? And not just in like the sexual or erotic context, but also just, is this the moment where my rage is going to serve us the best? Where my wrath needs to be seen? Maybe, but also I learned this the hard way, not directed at you, but just for this to be witnessed, because this energy needs to propel us and be the catalyst into the next thing that we're meant to be, growing into. Or is this the moment where I go and channel this rage into my personal practice? And this is why, going back to a piece of conversation from earlier, the most important practice at its core is practicing how to listen to that inner guidance. And to me, that is the voice of love. The inner guidance ultimately is the voice of love. And that voice will never shame me or shame anyone else. It will never be critical or judgmental or belittling. And sometimes that is all the criteria you need to distinguish between love and fear and what it is that is speaking to you.
I love you brought this up, because that actually brings me to the final piece that I wanted to cover with you, which is around love. We've been talking about navigating the darkest corners of our own humanity and our own psyche, and the journey, of spelunking, which is actually a term that I recently learned, and then coming out back into the light, which would be, love. And I remember one time, this was about 4 years ago, and I was with this ex partner of mine, and I remember it was a medicine journey, and I just dropped to my knees. I'm like, I worship at the altar of love, and he looked at me and he's like, I don't. And I was like, oh, well, that, I was like, oh, but I never forgot that. Okay, we are not on the same page. But it was interesting because at the time, the way that I took it, I was like, oh my gosh, am I too obsessive? Like, did I just
Uh,
is something wrong with me for being so passionate about this? Until, I started going deeper into this journey and meeting my fellow priestess sisters that are also worshiping at the
yes.
altar of love. And so, what I would love to get your perspective on even what you were saying about what is it that what was it that love would do, is what did your journey back into like being fully in your heart, like open heart, what would love do? Like that took some adjustments in your mindset, in your heart set, in your practice. So I'm curious, like, again, for those people who are in the earlier stages, they're still navigating their dark night of the soul. They're like, okay, this sounds good in theory, opening my heart, softening, asking what would love do. It sounds good in theory, but what does that mean really? Would you be able to speak into that from your embodied experience and really give whoever's listening to this and wants to just get a more of a taste of what this actually means and looks like and to embody in life? Can you share with us like how to get there?
Yeah. I mean, there are so many different ways. Again, it's just like any other part of the journey, right? It's so specific to the person and their experience and their context and what their soul is here to do. But for me, my perception, my understanding of what love is, like not love as in the feeling or being in love or even a choice. To me, love is at the core who we are and what we are. And so that bigger love, I think of like, if you think of like Bob Marley, it's like one love, right? It's just that love. Love, growing up in church, I was told God is love. And yet I was also told that God is a big man in the sky waiting for me to mess up and punish me. So those things were incongruent. That was the biggest thing I had to unpack, quite honestly. That and the relationship to that, to my sexuality and how it's actually all one. So love, to me, is that bigger consciousness, this consciousness from which everything comes and life itself is created. And that is the ultimate truth, is love. And everything else is meant to direct us back into deeper love. It's meant to break us open to more love. So, I mean, my process, my journey to that has been sifting through the layers of realizing what love is not. Love is not just fulfilling each other's needs. Love is not, a nice fuzzy feeling that we get whenever we feel accepted. But a lot of times in the moment, in the nitty gritty of life, it's doing the deeper work of accepting what is right in front of us. And so for those who are stuck, feeling stuck, you're never actually stuck, but for those who feel stuck in the despair of the dark night of the soul, just a visual that helped me a lot was like if I felt like I was in this big dark tunnel that was pitch dark behind me, but if I looked this way, I could see this little tiny, tiny, tiny crack of light, and I would expand that. And I'm like, there's the love. There's the love. All of this is also love, actually. That's the paradox. Is everything, all of this darkness is also love. But if I can just expand on this light just a little bit and give me that sense of peace that I'm so hungry for, it's just doing that on a daily basis in whatever way it looks like for you. But the journey to love, I've had so many downloads in my practices of being a devotee to love. And what does it look like to be devoted to that love on a daily basis? Sometimes it's sitting down and having conversations with my kids when I just don't feel like I have the bandwidth for it. But somehow it comes in. Sometimes it's doing the hard thing of having a conversation that is really uncomfortable. So again, the biggest distinction too that I would encourage people to feel into is if because we're always talking to ourselves, right? There's always an internal dialogue. Is that dialogue coming from a place of criticism and lack and scarcity and worry, judgment, shame, or is it coming from a place of of faith, encouragement, an invitation to surrender, uh, acceptance. And that is when we start to tune into that voice more, we tune into our deeper inner wisdom more clearly. And we start to siphon out all these distorted, stories that are just not true. So I feel like that is the practice of tuning back
Mm-hmm.
into the voice of love. I know that's a lot that we could go into there, but
Yeah. Well,
if that makes sense.
what I really love about what you're sharing, and this is what's become, again and again throughout this conversation, and also just throughout this podcast, and anyone who's worked with me or knows me knows that I'm a really big fan of landing the plane. And so even when we
Mm-hmm.
discuss these really important and still true and still, very significant esoteric topics, um, it's really important to bring them down through, those layers of consciousness and really ask the question, how can I walk away and implement this today? Like, what action step
Yes.
can I take to make this real? If I am listening to this person, and I can feel the truth of what he or she is saying in my body, if I can feel that what they're saying is true, even if I can't yet access that, what can I do today? And that's really one of the core, objectives that I have with this podcast. It's not just an episode where you're just filling your brain with really interesting stuff, and then you're like, well, that was a good listen, and then you go on about your day. I mean,
And
you
now
can do
what do I
that. You're
do?
totally welcome. Maybe perhaps
Yeah.
the seeds that we're speaking into here just get planted and they germinate, a few months or a few years from now. Everything is perfect. And also, if you can really reflect on what Luci's saying and take something away, at least I'll share what I'm taking away, is that in this journey from darkness to light, and then, it's not like a one-time stop and you don't ever do it again. There's going to be multiple dark nights of the soul. Like, we are cyclical beings.
Yeah.
We are living in human bodies that, act in accordance to nature, which is where we come from. And so what goes up must come down, and we have a dark night of the soul, and then we lift out, and then we have another one. And ideally, we're learning the lessons every stage, so that, I know when I had my next dark night of the soul, it was just as painful, but there wasn't as much suffering involved because I actually could do it with my eyes wide open. This time around, I knew who to ask for help. I had prepared myself. Like, I had the tools, I had the know-how. And so even though it was still dark and it was still painful, it felt like it was a cave that was just equally as dark as last time, except this time I learned how to swim a little better. I learned how to navigate my way a little better. And so what I'm really taking away is that importance of every day. Like, it's as simple as get on your mat or your cushion or whatever it is, like that space for you to sit with yourself, your spirit, God, Mother Nature, universe, whatever, whoever it is that you give your faith to, and just
Yes.
like come back into your center and ask yourself the right questions. What would love do? What is it that soul, what is it that you need me to know today? And the answer
Yeah.
might come up, like the example I share, like you might just get this message of just go dance or something that doesn't even make
Mm-hmm.
any kind of sense. But as Luci's saying, what's really important is to practice that deep listening to our inner guidance. And in order for us to do that, we need to create space for it. And the
Yeah.
practicality of that looks like make some time, take a walk in nature, go on your mat, do a morning routine, do a night routine, do whatever you need to do to create space to really, really listen to yourself, and then take it one day at a time rather than trying to figure it
Yes.
all out today. Like, take it one day at a time. Practice the muscle of your faith. Practice the muscle of asking the right question. Practice the muscle of discerning between what is love and what is fear, which Luci has so clearly described. Like, love sounds like this. It sounds encouraging. It sounds empowering. Fear sounds scary and like, it's just contractive, and it puts you into further contraction and scarcity. So discern fear, and love, and then show up in your life every day as love in the best possible way that you can. And if you mess up, which we most certainly all will, you just dust yourself off, you get back up, and you get into alignment with love again. Does that sound like a good summary?
Yes. Yes, exactly. I mean, the one thing I would, the big, like, practical thing is make a decision. What is it that you want to commit to on a daily basis and be consistent? Something that you can be as sustainable. Might not be sustainable to do a 1-hour pleasure practice every day. So don't do that.
Yeah.
Do something and let it take different forms depending on the season of your life. But the important thing is, it's getting on that mat and practicing those listening skills.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I love it when things are practical. That is my kink.
Yeah. See, my Capricorn is like, bitch, what's the point? What is the point? And then all the other parts of my water is like, let's go into the depths and let's talk about.
I've got like, I think I have 4 Capricorn placements on my chart. So I have a couple Scorpios. So I'm picking up what you're putting down. Beautiful. Well, as we arrive to the completion of today's episode, Luci, is there anything left that you want to express for people who've made it through this entire journey with us and leave them off with before we close off?
There is one brief addition. I'm going to condense this. When you do recognize the voice of fear, still listen. Listen to what it's telling you. Don't just block it out and say, you're not real. There is a gift there. Ask yourself, again, quality questions. There's a whole book I read, I remember, Quality Questions, changed my life. Ask yourself, where is the love trying to come through this? What is the love that this fear is trying to actually seed me with? And give it space to be heard, but just hold hold the space for the reality that it's not the ultimate truth.
I love the question, where is the love? It's a very practical question to use with like difficult friends, parents, family members when they're coming at you.
You really gotta look for it.
And you're like, where is the love? Where's the love? They're saying this thing because they love me. Just gotta dig in.
Yeah, where's the love? Exactly. But it's always there. It's just a little hard to find sometimes.
Yeah. But you got to ask the right questions. You prompt your subconscious with the right question. It will be forced to find the answer, either in your waking stages or in your sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
Another story for another time.
Many stories.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Luci. This has been it's been very illuminating, and I loved getting to know you in this way. I feel like we learned a lot about each other today. And
yes, I love this.
For those of you, listening, it is, as with every episode, my sincere intention that you've gotten the most value out of this. We have given you some very practical tools for you to walk away with today. And so the invitation is use them, because it might make your life better. Who am I to say? But that's my suspicion. So as always, if there's anything you absolutely loved about this episode, don't be shy. Take a screenshot. Tag me and Luci on Instagram. We would love to see what has touched you the most in today's episode. And Luci, how can we find you on the internets and beyond?
Oh, the internets and beyond. So you can visit my website, lucilampe.com, for all the current things and offerings, and then as well on Instagram at Luci Lampe.
Beautiful. And that's all going to be linked in the show notes. So, Luci, thank you for your beautiful presence today and for the deep chats. And I will see you soon on the internets and perhaps beyond.
Yes. It's a matter of time before we meet in person. I believe it.
I believe it.
Thank you, beautiful humans, for tuning in to today's episode of It's Not What You Think. If you loved what you received today, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on future episodes, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, as it helps us reach even more amazing listeners like you. If we aren't already connected on social media, come receive even more tips and inspiration by following me on Instagram at Celine DaCosta, or visiting my website at celinedacosta.com. After listening to this episode, I invite you to take a few moments to reflect. What stood out to you? What were your key takeaways or breakthroughs? And if there was one action step you could take from this, what would it be? Thank you again for joining me on this journey. I'm sending you so much love, and I can't wait to connect in the next episode. Until then, keep sharing your unique gifts and living out your most magical life.